Absolicon. Excellent, you're here. Johan Byström, it'll be fascinating to hear what you're going to tell us.
Yes.
Joakim, it says. That was a bit quick, thank you.
So, hello. I'm Joakim Byström from Absolicon, and usually I start to ask, how many here already own Absolicon shares? Let's see. Yes, good. Well, we are a few people. We have 3,500 owners in Sweden. According to Deloitte, we are the second quickest growing hardware company in Sweden. We are on Spotlight with about 20 million euro market cap, and we are aiming for the Nasdaq main market. And you will now get a very flood of slides to partly show you some background and then a little about Absolicon. And for most audience, I have cut out this background, but I think for you it could be useful. Yes, as Greta Thunberg says, our house is on fire. And in the Paris Agreement that you all know, we need to limit to 2 degrees, but aim for 1.5. Everyone knows that. But what not so many people know is to manage that, we need to get net zero emissions of greenhouse gases in the second half of this century. And I think this about zero hasn't really stuck into the mind of businesses. And it must look like this if we are going to manage the 1.5 degree roadmap, that we cut the emission by half every 10 years. So today we emit 40 gigaton of CO2, and then we need to cut to 20 gigaton in 2030, to 10 gigaton in 2040, and to 5 gigaton in 2050. And at the same time, we need to invent new technology that can take CO2 from the air and put it back into the ground. So the blue line here, that is CO2 being put back into the ground. So if you went here by car, your grandchildren need to find that CO2 in the air and put it back into the ground. So this is what it needs to look like if we're going to manage 1.5 degree. And this is how we have run humanity up to now. We have just built more coal power plants when we needed more energy. And we need to find a new way to solve this, because the world's energy need will continue to increase. In the past, that would just mean burning more oil, but now we need to find something else to fill up this gap between the need of humanity and what we get from fossil fuel. And wind power, of course, will be an important part, something like here. The only energy source that we can use to power mankind is solar. There is no other renewable energy source that is abundant. And at the same time as we are going to do this decrease by half every 10 years, we are going from 7.4 billion people on Earth and 1 billion middle class to being 10 billion people and 4 billion middle class. And it's us middle class people who actually put some strain on the ecosystems. And we will quadruple to 2050. So this is a double challenge. Cutting the CO2 by half every 10 years and quadruple the economy at the same time. And out of this, in the end of this century, there will be, today there are 1 billion people in Africa. In the end of the century, there will be 4 billion people in Africa. So that's a lot of growth. Another challenge is that if we're going to stay below the limits put by the scientists, we have already emitted about half of the CO2 that we can emit. So we still can emit some, but we have found this much oil and coal and gas. So not only we need to decrease by half every 10 years, we need also to get those countries and companies who own these resources to keep their fossil fuel in the ground. And this will be a huge diplomatic challenge. And I did this diagram 5 years ago, and then we had 1,000 gigatons left, but we emit 40 gigaton every year. So now we emitted 200 more. So now we actually spent 1,500, and we only have 800 left. So those 5 years we literally wasted not handling this problem. Because in the past, to get more electricity, you just built more coal plants. But today, renewable electricity is bigger than the fossil when it comes to investments. $300 billion were invested in wind and solar, and only 177 in fossil and nuclear. So you have this number, But still, the oil companies, they invest $800 billion in finding new oil and gas and coal extractions. So even though we have already found much more than we can burn, they still invest $800 billion every year. And so for the electricity, we have already won. Renewable is cheaper. Elon and other companies will actually manage this. So why do they invest 800 billion in new findings? Well, that is because electricity is only 20%. So in electricity, the fossil is toasted, but it's only 20%. If you look at one of my important messages today is that heat is half of the energy consumption. And if we look at the industry that consumes a third of the global final energy use, you see they use some small electricity here, but the main is heat. And if we take all those fantastic investments in solar and wind, it's just like this. So the whole renewable electricity sector, they have a lot of work to do to replace all the coal-powered plants and all the gas-powered plants, and they need to fix the transport sector. But someone needs to care about the heat. Yeah, that's us. We have a part of that puzzle at least. So remember this figure, 20% electricity, 30% transport, and 50% heat. And for the electricity now, we have this fantastic development in wind and solar. On the transport, Elon Musk is revolutionizing the transport sector, and also the trucks and the boats and the planes will have new solutions. And for the heat, we need to use the sun, to use solar panels and solar collectors to produce renewable heat. To communicate this, we have created a logo type to show this, that heat is half. So next time I stand here, I will have this button, you know, and I will give you out one button to all of you saying heat is half, so you really remember it. So to handle this, we have developed a solar collector. We started in 2002 that focused the light in the narrow line on a black pipe. It works like a magnifying glass and can create temperature up to 160 degrees. These solar fields that we build, then they heat an accumulator, and then you have a heat exchanger, and then you feed energy to an industry or to a city. And the solar collector we have developed is the world's most efficient concentrating collector. It has 76% optical efficiency. So 76% of the direct sunlight coming into the collector is converted into heat. So that's an efficiency that you can try to beat with 76%. And we're also the only small parabolic trough in the world to have the solar key mark certification. To get this high efficiency, it's a combination of building a really good mechanical design and using top-notch research materials. We have a self-cleaning nano-coated glass, we have a silver reflector, and we have a magic pipe which absorbs all the light in the visible spectrum, but that emits no infrared light. So it keeps all the heat inside. So Absolicon is a research company having developed this kind of solutions. And this is the real thing. This is a field of Absolicon collectors heating a part of Härnösand. A sunny day, our collectors put 5% of the heat of the whole city. So what we have done is an optimized solar thermal system for industries and district heating up to 160 degrees. This is our, you could say, innovation. And compared to the old technology with flat solar thermal panels, we get 50% higher output in Denmark for a solar field with the same area and the same investment. So it's a really revolution to how to produce solar heat. But we are mainly now aiming at the industry. And many people think that if you buy a beer, for example, it is produced by electricity. No. All the processes in a brewery is run by heat. And the heat is coming from an oil burning standing in the back of the factory. So the mashing, the bottle washing, the pasteurization, the cleaning of the pipes, all this is run by steam in pipes coming from an oil burner. So in a typical brewery, a third of the electricity production a third of the energy production is electricity, and 2/3 are heat. Of course, they use some electricity because they have some laptops, you know, and some lights. But the main energy consumption is heating. It's the same with the dairy, you know, milk. The main process is pasteurizing the milk with heat, but you also have the separation, and if you do dry milk, you need to boil away all the water, and here also has the cleaning. So in a typical brewery, a quarter is electricity, and 3/4 are heat. So when we look at fixing the world's energy supply, the electricity is already solved, because renewable electricity is already cheaper than the fossil. And you can see the multinationals now, one by line, lining up to promise to have 100% renewable electricity. But they also need to fix the 3/4 that is heat. And that you do with parabolic concentrators. So a typical brewery or dairy, they have 1/4 electricity and 3/4 of heat. And the electricity will come in the future for photovoltaic cells with 18% efficiency and storage of the electricity in batteries. And the heat, it must come from parabolic troughs, making steam. You have 76% efficiency, and you store the heat in hot water tanks. Heat is really easy to store compared to electricity. So if I want you to bring something from my presentation, it is heat is half, and that there is 2 energy sources, PV and solar thermal. So that's an important message here. Then we come to Absolicon and our business idea. Okay, we have developed the best parabolic trough in the world for industries. But what we sell is robotized production line. So we have packaged all our patents and all our knowledge into these machines where we have 2 large ABB robots producing the collectors. When we produced the collectors in the beginning, we made 2 collectors every day, but they were the best in the world. But we can't change the energy supply of the world by making 2 collectors every day. So we developed this production line, and now we can do 1 collector every 6 minutes. So this produced 50 megawatt per year of solar thermal collectors. And we have protected this with 10 patent families. We have already sold the first production line to China. So this is sold and paid and delivered. And now we are working all over the world to sell both production lines, but also to introduce our solar collector. And recently we announced the last one, so now we have 3 production lines where we have signed framework agreements: South Africa, Kenya, and Cyprus. And those 3 markets, we cooperate with multinationals that want to buy the solar collectors. But the deal for each one of this is the production line is 4 million euro. They pay 4% license fee, and they have to buy 30% of the material from Absolicon, the high-tech stuff, the pipe, the glass, the reflector. Next step now is the multinationals. And we work with several of them. And just a few weeks back, we signed an agreement with AB InBev that produce Budweiser and Corona beer. And we are now building a small pilot for them in Mozambique. And if this succeeds, they will buy 20,000 square meters in an investment of about 5 million euro. So InBev is the largest brewery company in the world, with 50 billion in turnover and 40% EBITDA. They have 260 breweries, and they have committed to reduce the CO2 emissions by 25% to 2025. And they've selected Absolicon as one of their accelerator companies that they would like to spread to all their breweries. The other interesting thing is another big company, the Saline Water Conversion Corporation. They are the largest desalination company in the world, in Saudi Arabia. They produce 5 million tons of fresh water every day. So in Saudi Arabia, 50% of all the fresh water they drink is desalinated, and 40% is groundwater. But the groundwater is running out, so they need to find a new solution. And guess how they are making their desalinated water today? Of course, they're burning oil. And they think that maybe they can use the sun instead. So we work with many of those multinationals now to find this kind of deal. So I hope to be able to announce more largest company in the world deal here in the future. So Absolicon, we have put financial targets to have 10 million euro turnover, positive cash flow, and 50% margin on the production lines in 2022. And we are also aiming for the Nasdaq main market. And last year, I had a presentation round like this, and we took in 9 million Swedish. And this was a sales campaign that led to 3 signed framework agreements. And now it's no reason for us to take in just a little money. So now we are taking in 50 million in expansion capital from Absolicon. And that is closing the 12th of March on Thursday. So you can buy shares for 110 each. But we are also trying to involve a few larger investors to get access to those financial structures. Okay, this was the background. Yeah,
interrupt you now. I'm sorry. We have the time frame to hold on to.
But did I take 20 minutes already?
Yes. We do have questions for you that I think people would like to get some answers for. What is the lifetime of the parabolic troughs? Is it largely dependent on where they are operating?
The lifetime, I usually say it's the same as a window. That it's a glass, it doesn't really wear. You know, a solar PV panel, it decreased 1% every year. But these materials that we work with, they don't degrade. So you have the same output every year for at least 25 years.
Mm-hmm. How about competition?
We are the only company in the world to sell this kind of production lines. There are a few making this kind of parabolic troughs, but there's no one having the same efficiency as ours. Mm-hmm. And what we hope is that if they can build a small market, we can actually sell them a production line. So competitors are our future customers.
All right, let's see if we have any questions in the room. All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation and best of luck with your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.